Hi guys, it's a short video, well I say short by my standards, on evolution, adaptation and inheritance. Just a bit of a guide to help you if you need it. So, let's start off. The primary science curriculum, in year one it tends to focus on identifying different types of plants and animals and then looking at some of their common features that they've got. So for example, fish have got fins, um, birds have got wings, etc., etc. By year two, we're starting to look at whether things were living, dead, or they've never been alive, and then start to actually look at the habitats in which they live. Then start again to continue that process of identifying and naming a variety of plants and animals, but including the habitats in which they live. So by the time we get to year three, then we start looking at fossils. That's always worth looking at again, just to see where the children have come from and the fact that the children enjoy it too. Year four, we start the process of classification keys, and we start to recognise that environments can change and that this does pose dangers to living things by putting stresses on them or habitat loss, etc. Then you get to year six, and it's kind of split into two parts. One is classification, and the other bit is evolution and inheritance. The classification bit is to describe how living things are classified into broad groups and to give reasons for classifying plants and animals. So a lot of it's based on what we call cladistics. That will be covered mainly in your classification unit. The bit that we're interested in, the important part for today, is the evolution and inheritance objective. So this is recognise that living things have changed over time and that fossils provide information about living things that inhabited the earth millions of years ago. Recognise that living things produce offspring of the same kind, but normally offspring vary and are not identical to their parents. Identify how animals and plants have adapted to suit their environments in different ways, and that adaptation may lead, doesn't always, but may lead to evolution. So, the non-statutory guidance. Building on the work that they've learned in fossils and the fact that there have been different types of life that are no longer with us because they're now extinct, and the evidence of where we find out about that. They should be introducing the idea that characteristics are passed from parent to their offsprings. So you can use real-life examples such as crossing dog crossbreeds. So Labradors and poodles become Labradoodles, etc. They should also appreciate that variation in offspring over time can make animals more or less able to survive in particular environments. So, for example, by exploring how a giraffe's neck got longer or the development of insulating fur in an Arctic fox. Pupils might find out about the work of paleontologists such as Mary Anning, or about how Alfred Wallace and Charles Darwin developed their ideas on evolution. Please note at this stage, pupils are not expected to understand genetics. So, working scientifically, again non-statutory, but it's there to help us. Observing and raising questions about local animals, how they're adapted to live in the environment. We could do that in school. I.e., it's a hedgehog, what does it do over winter? Why does it do that? Where does it live? You could also then look at more extreme conditions. They're quite a little bit more obvious for the children to understand. So, for example, a cactus, penguin, camels. They might analyse the advantages and disadvantages of specific adaptations. Not all adaptations that animals have got are great. They are good for a certain place, but not for another. An example is being on 2 feet. For human beings, it's very energy efficient for walking over long distances, but we're very, very slow compared to four-legged animals, such as a dog. I also experienced that when walking on ice recently. Jasper found it far easier to walk, whereas for me, I was slipping all over the place. An introduction. So all living things have to adapt in order to survive within their respective environments. Those species which are better adapted will live longer and have a greater opportunity to pass on their genotype to their offspring. This is known as survival of the fittest. Basically, you've got to live long enough in order to breed. So, genetics. Put simply, children don't need to know it, but it is useful if you do. So, genes. All life is encoded using a combination of 4 molecules. Adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. They're paired A, T, C, and G. When you put them together, they form a double helix structure, which we call DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. So what? Small sections of DNA are called genes. Genes are the instructions, a little akin to algorithms, if you want to get a bit of computing in there, that instruct the body to build a specific protein, to build in specific ways. Genes, however, are not always the same. The ATCG combinations can be slightly different. This might not stop the gene from doing its job, but it might change what the final outlook is. So examples of this are eye pigment, skin colour, hair colour, etc. These different versions of the same gene are called alleles, and the alleles are what cause variance within species. And you can see that within human beings. We have the same overall genetic structure, but the alleles mean that our genes express themselves differently from person to person. That's why we've all got different hair colour, skin colour, eye colour. So the inheritance. Genes are passed down from their parents to their offspring. All genes are paired, except from the father, except from the mother. Sperm and egg can only carry a single copy of each gene. This causes a mixing of genes upon repairing, and it's a random process. And as you can see by my beautiful Play-Doh antics here, that the offspring has got features of both the mother and the father. That is a very good activity to do, is using Play-Doh for the teaching of evolution and inheritance. Try to avoid questions that give away things about a person's parentage. For example, blood groups, lobed ears, rolling tongues, etc. It's not necessary in primary school. Please avoid it. X-Men and human evolution. So you could link this to literacy or just to general characters to engage the children's interest. So they've got mutated genes which increase their variance from the rest of the human population. They give them special powers. The children can design their own character. What does their mutation cause? What are the natural selection processes involved? What advantages does it give them in order to survive? So there are two main models. Sorry, guys. There are two main models of evolution. One is called gradual evolution, that states that small changes occur constantly over time. So a species is always changing and always adapting. There's another theory of evolution, though, that's called punctuated evolution. And this is where a species remains unchanged until a major event happens that causes it to change quite quickly. Gradual evolution. This is a theory initially proposed by Sir Charles Darwin on his Origin of Species in 1859. Speciation occurs through the exploitation of slight differences on how genes are expressed, that's variance. This happens due to sexual, that's mate choices, and natural predator-prey selection. Species are constantly evolving. Minor changes occur over long periods of time. It's survival of the fittest. The three web links there that I've checked that do work, that do kind of help to show this process. I've also included a link to the STEM website, and on here there are 6 units, each with a video and each with worksheets, which might help you out. One of them does really lend itself more to year 3, and another one, the living things and classification, doing your classification unit if it helps you. So punctuated evolution. Gradual evolution is not supported by the fossil record. Basically, the fossil record seems to show big changes and big deaths. It doesn't seem to show that things change gradually bit by bit. Punctuated evolution maintains that species do not change unless there is a major selection cause. It might be an isolated population of animals. It could be a change of habitat, i.e. the rainforest being chopped down and they've had to find a new way to survive. These fitter genes quickly populate the gene pool because the other ones, well, they're all dead. Natural selection. Due to variance within populations of species, some animals or plants are slightly better adapted to their environments. This gives them an advantage when hunting, foraging, for food to avoid predation. Basically, if you're dead, you can't breed. These individuals are more likely to survive in order to reproduce, passing on their genes to the next generation. Sexual selection. This is a form of natural selection, but is determined by a species' preference to a mate. This does not always result in more efficient, better adapted species. The examples of peacock. Yeah, the male looks great and is a great show-off, but his flight ability is severely hindered by the length of his tail feathers. A female will choose such a male because it's clear that he's fitter, as he's able to afford to use a lot more energy in creating the plumage. So it's indicated, well, if this male looks really good, then he's clearly got the ability to hunt and to forage. Therefore, it will pass on good genes. Over generations, these sexual features can become very, very, very elaborate. The peppered moth's a good example. What causes change? I think some of you know, because many of you have taught this before, but it was to do with the Industrial Revolution. The peppered moth used to be a sort of light white sort of colour on the trees. During the Industrial Revolution, there was so much soot and smoke into the air that it turned the trees black. So those with the allele that expressed them as black in coloration, they didn't get seen by birds as easily. They were better camouflaged, so the light-coloured ones got eaten. As the Industrial Revolution passed and we started to clean things up and the trees got cleaner again, then those that were white were better camouflaged, and those that were dark then got eaten by the birds. So it's a selective pressure in this case. Tree of life. This is something you'll cover during classification work, in particular the binomial system used by Carl Linnaeus. A few tasks and things to consider. This is from Horrible Histories, Evolve or Die, and there's a series of sort of fact cards in there with dates on. you could use that to get the children to order them numerically, and then what do they notice about life over time? This here I'll let you read in your own time, but this is by Bill Bryson, and it gives you a very good understanding as to just how recent humanity is on the grand scale of time over the last 4.5 billion years. That should not say 4,500 billion odd years. It should say 4.5 billion odd years. My apologies. So you keep reading through this, and keep reading through this, and that is from his book, Bill Bryson's A Short History of Nearly Everything. How Life is Categorized. So this is the system used by Carl Linnaeus. It's a binomial system. I know that you teach this already. The acronym that I'd like to use is keep plucking chickens or face getting sacked. So it's kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Kingdoms of life, Animalia, Plantae, Fungi, Protoctista, and Monera. Again, have a look on the websites to brush up on these. The hardest ones, I think, for me are Monera and Protoctista. The other ones are quite self-explanatory. Adaptation. So again, focus on things like the cactus here. Uses needles instead of leaves. It reduces the surface area. They've got a thick, waxy cuticle. That means that the water can't evaporate from the leaf. There's a large network of roots, but they're quite shallow, so they're lateral and they're not deep. So when it rains, it absorbs the water very quickly. They also have a large capacity to store water in them. It would be helpful if you guys could actually see the website. There we go. Polar bears, white camouflage. So white fur camouflages the bear, so it's less seen when hunting. Actually, they're hollow, if I'm being honest, and reflect the snow around them. Fat from its meals are distributed all over the body for insulation. Paws have got thick hair, so they don't freeze. Hair follicles are hollow, so the warm air is trapped. Small ears and tail reduces surface area for heat and dissipation. Large body to surface area ratio reduces heat loss. That's why they've got small ears and a small tail. Hibernation. They're asleep over the worst of the winter. Again, a website there to help you. Adaptation task. You can always use a book called Flanimals by Ricky Gervais. It's great. It's an absolutely fantastic book, and I recommend you look at it. The children can do writing activities from that as well, writing about their own species that's been discovered in a far-flung part of the world. So use Play-Doh to actually create their organism or plant. Maybe get them to create their own animal, and then get other children to go around asking the questions. What do you think it is? Is it a plant or an animal? Where do you think that plant lives and why? What might it eat? Is it a carnivore, herbivore, omnivore? What are its key adaptations? Look at human lineages. Again, if you want to have a look at human evolution, it's not necessarily something you might want to cover, but nevertheless it is there. One thing to be warned with human evolution, it's very punctuated, and it's also quite controversial. Humans and great apes. Common misconception, human beings are not evolved from chimpanzees. Human beings are evolved to be human beings, and chimpanzees are evolved to be chimpanzees. But just to show you the lineages, chimpanzees are between 95 and 98.5% genetically identical to humans. That's through comparisons of skeletal structures and DNA. You can see here that gibbons were the first to split off about 15 to 20 million years ago. Orangutans about 14 million years ago. Gorillas 4 to 6 million years ago, and chimpanzees around 4 to 6 million years ago as well. But we are related. So humans are not descended from chimpanzees. A chimp is perfectly evolved to the habitat in which they currently live. I say that in theory. We've all seen me when I've not had a shave. Fossils. The fossil records hold great clues regarding the types of organisms that have existed over the last 3 billion years or so of life on Earth. The record is incomplete, and that happens because of plate tectonics. It happens because animals were eaten, their bones were crushed, whatever it might be over time. The children will need to know what fossils are, how they form, and types of organisms found, and biographical focus on Mary Annan, which is covered in Year 3. Again, that's there for Year 3, but it's there to look at if you need it. Modelling fossilisation, again for Year 3, but again, you might want to look at it. Don't forget, scientist studies. You're covering Charles Darwin. However, don't forget to have a look at Alfred Russel Wallace as a reading comprehension. He came independently to the same conclusions as Darwin. The Wallace line is named after him. It's a faunal boundary line which separates the marsupial-dominated Australia from the placental mammal-dominated Asia. This split was caused due to plate tectonics. Religion. Evolution is probably the most contentious aspect of the current science curriculum. It directly conflicts with major religious views on divine creation and intelligent design. stay clear of it. Remember, evolution is not RE, it's biology. So you can always start off by saying scientists believe that. A few books that might help you here. You've got Flanimals, you've got Flanimals of the Deep, Little Changes. I've got quite a few of these in school, so if you want some, just let me know and I will do what I can for you. So many thanks. I hope this has been semi-useful to you. If you've got any questions, please come and see me and I'll do what I can for you. Thank you guys. Bye-bye.